boys and girls. It's Miss Robinson, your third grade math teacher for the year. So last week we started introducing fractions. We started talking about representing fractions, and we drew some geometrical shapes, right? Some figures, and we learned about the different parts of a fraction. So let's review what we learned last week. So we talked about these things last week, right? We talked about that a fraction is just a number that represents part of a whole. So if we had like one whole of something, it could be part of it, right? If I have this piece of paper, right, this piece of paper is my one whole, but each side of these is just a part of that whole, right? It's one half of it. So let's just go over the different parts of a fraction. We see this line with a number on top and a number on bottom. What does that all mean? Well, this bottom number is called our denominator. And the denominator represents how many parts there are that make one whole. So for this, it's 4 parts. If we were to look at our paper, it's 2 parts, 1, 2. And the top number is called the numerator. The top number is called the numerator, but it represents how many parts of that whole we're dealing with, right? So if I had this paper, right, I'll show you this side. I have 2 parts, so that would be my denominator, but each one of these is only worth 1/2 or 1/2 of the whole paper. So that's what we went over last week. And then we used some figures to go over this and things like that. So let's look at our objective and how it's going to be a little bit different this week, a little bit of an extension from last week. I can represent fractions, so we're still representing fractions by using strip diagrams, which we use for all types of word problems, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, right? We use different types of strip diagrams. I don't know why I can't say that word right now. Strip diagrams and number lines, which we also use number lines for everything. So it's just a connection. In 3rd grade, we're going to be using number lines and strip diagrams for everything. All right. So now let's look at, if you have a notebook for school, I would like you to get it out, especially if you're not going to classes online or in person, so that you get some of this information. This stuff is so important because when you get to 4th grade, they don't spend all this time talking about what a fraction is and representing it, right? You get straight to adding, subtracting, comparing, ordering, right? We get all this time in 3rd grade. We get all this time to just enjoy fractions and have fun with them. So go ahead and get that. And label your page fraction strip diagrams. Okay, so I'm going to do this with some strips of colorful paper, but you probably don't have that, so you can just draw what I draw too. I'm going to make an example with a strip of paper for a strip diagram. Then I'm going to draw an example, and then you can just do the drawing and color it later. All right? So for the first one, I have a strip of paper. I'm going to match my sides up. I have to match it up perfectly because when we have a fraction, I don't know if you remember this from last week, but all of our parts have to be equal parts. It's like division. They have to have the same size. They have to be the same size. So if I don't match my corners up, it's going to be very difficult to know if it's the same size. So I unfolded it, and I have 2 parts. I have 2 parts. So 2 parts means I'm going to have a denominator. Let me put this up there for you guys. So I have 2 parts, right? Because of that, that means each of these parts is going to have a denominator of 2, right? Because the denominator is how many total parts make a whole. So if this orange strip of paper is my whole, that means there's 2 parts to each of it. And each of these parts is worth 1/2 of the total, right? This is only one part and this is only one part. So each part is going to be labeled 1/2. Now I'm going to draw what this might look like if I didn't have paper, right? Because eventually we're not going to be using paper for this. Find that halfway point, like if it was a number line, find that halfway point and make 2 sections. And each of these is also worth 1/2. I'm going to write the word halves, right? Because this is representing our halves with strip diagrams. I'm going to give you guys a minute to write all this down. Okay, we're going to be moving on to the next one. So we're going to skip over thirds for right now. We'll do that at the end, or at the end of this part. We're going to go stick with ones that are easy to fold and write first. So I'm going to get my other strip of paper, another strip of paper. I'm going to fold it in half, like I said, matching those corners to the best of my ability. Holding it nice and tight so I can see that crease. So then it looks like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that paper in half again. So it looks like this. I'm going to unfold it and we'll see that there are 4 parts. Let me draw the lines for you. Here I have 4 parts. That means my denominator is going to be 4, right? The number that I put on the bottom, which is how many parts, or the denominator, is going to be 4. I'm going to label each of these sections 1/4 because each of these is only one of the 4 total sections. And I'm going to draw what this would look like. When I'm drawing it, I find a halfway point to the best of my ability, and I draw a line down. Then, in each of these 2 sections I have, I find both of their halfway points and I draw a line down, and there should be 4 sections. So I cut it in half, and I cut the halves in half. And of course, it's not going to be perfect, but we have to do the best we can. All right, So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to write down all that I have here and write fourths down. Fourths, because that's what we just did, our fourths. About 15 more seconds. All right, so I want you guys on the count of 3 to say the word fourths with me, like you're in 4th grade, but we're not yet. 1, 2, 3. Fourths, fourths. Okay? Good job. We just need to practice saying it instead of saying 1/4, right? It's not 1/4, it's 1/4. So now I'm going to get another piece of paper and we're going to move on to our eighths. So I'm going to do exactly what I just did. Match my corners up and fold. Then I'm going to fold this in half like I just did. All right, this is how we got our fourths. And then I'm going to fold it one more time. So a total of 3 folds in half. And it's going to give us 8 pieces. Isn't it crazy how that works? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to draw the line so you guys can see it better. So I have these 8 spaces. I know it looks like more, but there is 8. I'm going to put it up on my paper. Okay, so now let's make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's hard to not look at it. 5, 6, 7, 8. So our denominator is 8, and each individual one of these is worth 1/8. So this is what our eighths look like in a strip diagram. I'm going to draw it next to it, doing the same thing so that you can kind of see what it'll look like for you. So we find our halfway point and we draw a line. Then we find each of our halves again and draw a line. And then we have our 4 sections and we cut each of the 4 sections in half. And now we can label our 8 sections. And I'm going to write eighths on this. I'm going to give you 1 minute to write all this down. All right, so now we're going to move on to our thirds and our sixths. These are a little bit trickier because we can't cut them or we can't fold them perfectly, but we can do our best. So I'm going to grab another strip of paper. Now I do not fold it in half like I folded everything else in half. I try to find as close as possible to it being like this space being the same size as this space, right? And I'll kind of just do a light line so I don't accidentally make a mistake. And then I'll do that. And when I see it's very close to being the same size, it's like folding a letter. If you guys have done that in reading yet, when you make letters, you put them into thirds. And let me draw my lines for you. All right, so I have 3 sections, and each of these 3 sections is worth 1 of the total 3, so 1/3. And then I can also draw this. You're just going to have to try and do your best to try and find where the thirds are equal, but you have pencils, you can erase what you're doing. I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to write this down. All right, so we're going to do the last strip model for the day before we do some practice problems. So this one is going to be a mix of like 2 different things we've done. We are going to fold it in half first. We are going to find that halfway point. Right, and so once it's in half, I wait a minute. Now I need to fold this half into thirds like I just did that. So you kind of have to see, where does it look like it's like halfway between the 2 sections? Not halfway, but a third of the way. And it's difficult. I usually help my students with this part because thirds are difficult to do. So sometimes you might need help from a grown-up at home or maybe from your teacher or something, and that's fine. And so you can't see right now, but there are 6 sections. Let me trace the lines for you. Okay. So we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I have 6 sections. So that's going to be my denominator, right? Because that's the amount of parts that make a whole. But each one is only 1/6, right? It's only one part of the 6 total. I'm also going to draw a picture of what this will look like. And for this, just like with the folding, you find the halfway point and you put each of the halves into thirds. Now mine is not perfect, but we can just do the best we can. I'm going to give you guys a minute to write all this down. All right, guys. So now we have all of our fraction strip diagrams down. If you need to go back, you can go on YouTube or you can pause it and go to wherever you need to see. Now, we don't have a ton of time for practice problems, but we do have enough time to just kind of look at some. We will not get to number lines today because we took a while to get this, but I feel like it was really important for us to really get that foundation down. Next week, we can extend the number lines and connect them a little bit and do a little bit more, all right? But now let's look at some practice problems. So I want to look at this one first. Right. I want to look at this one first. I see it, I already labeled it for you guys. That was very nice, Miss Robinson. There's going to be a few that weren't labeled, but we won't get to those today. So I see I have 2 parts or 2 halves, right? And I see one is, I said shaded, but I highlighted it, but to you guys it just looks yellow. All right, so I have one of those 2 parts shaded. So what I first need to do is see that there are 2 parts. So I'm going to make my denominator for both of these 2. It's important that I know the denominator is how many total parts that make one whole, right? Now I can look at the shaded part or the highlighted part. I have one part that is highlighted or shaded. So that would be 1/2 or 1/2. I also only have one part that is not shaded or not highlighted. So that would be also 1/2. I'm going to give you guys a minute to just kind of write what I did. A little bit of time for that. Actually, what I want you guys to do now is I want you guys to try this one on your own. I'm going to give you 1 minute to draw it, 1 minute and 30 seconds to draw this and answer this problem. 1.5 minutes. About 45 more seconds. If you haven't gotten it all drawn, that's okay. Now I want you to work on solving it, okay? All right, so now I'm going to show you how I'm going to solve this. Now I do know this problem does give me its denominator, but I'm still going to count to check. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I know for both of these, the denominator is going to be 6. Because there are 6 total parts that make this strip diagram, a strip model. Now, I'm going to start with shaded. It doesn't matter if it's not shaded or shaded that you started with. I'm going to just physically count how many parts are shaded. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 of these parts are shaded. So 4 parts of the 6, which would be 4/6. 4/6 are shaded. Now let's see how many parts are not shaded. 1, 2. So 2 of the 6 parts are not shaded, or 2/6. Excellent job, guys. I'm really proud of you for staying along, following, and really working through these problems with me. Next week, we're going to extend this information and talk more about fractions and representing fractions. And eventually, we're going to get to comparing fractions and seeing if fractions are equal or equivalent. That's the word we're going to be using. So be excited for that. Have a great week, guys. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.